and had gotten down to verse 21 in our study last week. But this goes back to a section beginning in verse 6, dealing with the day of the Lord, and primarily dealing with, as far as the day of the Lord here, judgment. So let's read that, and then we'll come back to verse 21 and start our study there tonight. Therefore thou hast forsaken thy people, the house of Jacob, because they are replenished from the east, and are soothsayers like the Philistines, and they please themselves in the children of strangers. Their land also is full of silver and gold, neither is there any end of their treasuries. Their land is also full of horses, and neither is there any end of their chariots. Their land also is full of idols. They worship the work of their own hands, that which their own fingers have made. The mean man boweth down, and the great man humbleth himself. Therefore forgive them not. Enter into the rock, and hide thee in the dust, for the fear of the Lord, and for the glory of his majesty. The lofty looks of man shall be humbled, and the haughtiness of men shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. For the day of the Lord of hosts shall be upon every one that is proud and lofty, and upon every one that is lifted up, and he shall be brought low. And upon all the cedars of Lebanon that are high and lifted up, and upon all the oaks of Bashan, and upon all the high mountains, and upon all the hills that are lifted up, and upon every high tower, and upon every fenced wall, and upon all the ships of Tarshish, and upon all the pleasant pictures, and the loftiness of man shall be bowed down, and the haughtiness of men shall be made low, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. The idols he shall utterly abolish, and they shall go into the holes of the rocks, and into the caves of the earth, for the fear of the Lord, and for the glory of his majesty, when he ariseth to shake terribly the earth. In that day a man shall cast his idols of silver, and his idols of gold, which they have made each one for himself to worship, to the moles and to the bats, to go to the clefts of the rocks, and into the tops of the ragged rocks, for the fear of the Lord, and for the glory of his majesty, when he is arisen to shake terribly the earth. Cease ye from man, whose breath is in his nostrils, for wherein is he to be accounted for, or of. So in this section, there's Israel has associated with foreigners or strangers. They've acted like them, accepted their sorcery and witchcraft, and married them. They then trusted in their own riches and their own strength, and not in God. Their idolatry is going to be leading them to their destruction, especially or specifically the proud and their idols, and their exaltation of God. And then there's no need to trust in man. But in verse 21, to go into the clefts of the rocks and into the tops of the ragged rocks for the fear of the Lord, and for the glory of his majesty, when he ariseth to shake terribly the earth. They are going to be attempting to conceal themselves from the wrath of God. Now, are they going to be able to do that? Who learned that you cannot run from God? Adam and Eve, you can start with them, that's true. Jonah is the one that I was thinking of actually, but Adam and Eve is just as good. They couldn't hide themselves from God. Jonah could not hide himself from God, even though he tried to and he did run the opposite way from where God told him to go. Well, these now going to go into the rocks and all the clefts of the rocks and try and hide themselves from God, but it's not going to be able to be accomplished. It's futile in their efforts. These verses, verse 21, and actually going back a few verses, very similar to Revelation, the 6th chapter, and verses 15 through 17. And there it says that, and the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every freeman, hid themselves in the dens, and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of his Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? So it's similar in nature to what we see there in Revelation, even though the application of that situation is different. Yet here you have the same type of attitude. Let me go into these areas and try to hide from God. And in both cases it's futile. So verse 22, Cease ye from man whose breath is in his nostrils, for wherein is he to be accounted of? This sums up basically stating, do not place your trust in man. Man is frail. The idea of his breath is in his nostrils. Basically, he's saying man is but a breath of air. Can you think of another passage maybe in the New Testament that teaches that type of an attitude? James, the 4th chapter, where he says that man is but a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away. That would be, I think, 2 Samuel 14 and verse 14. That we must needs die and or as water spilt upon the ground. Man here is but a breath of air. Here and gone. And apart from God, man cannot do anything. Name something that we can do apart from God. I knew I'd get a whole bunch of answers on that. Evil or sin. In reality, no. We couldn't even do that apart from God. You're still not getting the point, though.
You can't do anything without the life that he gives you.
Okay, now then you're coming more to the aspect that I was thinking of. Can we even exist without God? That's the whole point. You can't do anything without God. You cannot exist. You can't. The very fact that we have air to breathe. Why? Because God sustains this world. He created the world. The rain, the sunshine, comes from God. Remember, Jesus says that God makes the rain and the sun to shine or to rain upon the evil and the good alike. So there's nothing that we would be able to do apart from God. Okay, Dale.
You can go to Job 34, 11 and following. It says automatic when you read it that he maintains our life. And it kind of like describes it in much detail.
Okay.
Good Lord.
There's nothing we can do apart from God. Isn't it sad that so many want to expel God from everything? That's what the type of society that we're living in now. Without God, would we know what's best for us? Would we know how to walk? Would we know what our true needs are? Why do you think people in the world are just stumbling around making fools of themselves because they don't have any way in which to live? They're seeking for something, but nothing satisfies them.
Well, he said for life and godliness, the word for, what else is there?
There in 2 Peter 1:3, that he's given us all things pertaining to life and godliness. Where's peace found, for example? In God? Didn't Jesus say, John 14:27, peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. What about rejoicing? Joy within your life. Where is it found? Rejoice in the Lord. Where's purpose of life? It's in God. The whole of man is fear God and keep his commandments. Ecclesiastes 12:13. Man has nothing without God. And now then, when we say apart from God, that's also including the revelation that God gives unto us. Because it's through that revelation we know those things. We know God and his will for us. We know about purpose of life and what our purpose is to be. We know about joy and peace and how to have those things. We know everything that we know from the way in which to live based upon what God has revealed to us.
The end of Revelation 4 says, for thy pleasure they are and were created.
Okay, that goes back to the purpose of life. So this gives basically, why place your trust in man? And that's what he's saying here. Cease ye from man. Don't place your trust there. Don't put confidence in man. Now then, let's make a little bit different application in this. Because a lot of times people place, and I'm talking about Christians now, members of the Lord's church place their trust in elders or preacher or some other member. Wouldn't the same principle hold true? Shouldn't we place our trust in God and not in man? As good as the best man is, he's still man, isn't he? And he's still weak and has the same shortcomings that everyone else has. So place your trust in God.
I've always looked up to David, but before we start in 2 Samuel 11, he read the book. He sure lets people down.
Okay.
David is really strong.
That's not really applicable for what we're talking about as far as placing your trust in men today. So that's the way in which he ends up this section. Don't place your trust, stop placing your trust in man, because he's frail, weak, and apart from God and revelation from God, he can't do anything.
Well, even in today's society, you'd think that you could tell a person if he's building something himself, he's going to work with it. I mean, he's got to be a loony to begin with.
Well, he would be a loony. Well, yeah, he would be. But yet that's the way in which that was the thinking back then. That here's this idol that you bow down and worship. Let's face it, how many in the world do that today? Untold numbers do. So, is it foolishness? Yes. Can't they realize the situation that they have? And that's what Isaiah talks about many times in relationship to idols. They have, they'll make an idol out of this, and then with the other part of that same material, they, for example, cook with it or heat with it. And so he's showing the foolishness of such. Okay, chapter 3. In the first 15 verses, we have the vengeance of the wealthy. Vengeance on the wealthy. A little bit difference there in there. Vengeance of the wealthy. So let's read these 15 verses and then come back to verse 1. For behold, the Lord of hosts doth take away from Jerusalem and from Judah the stay and the staff, the whole stay of bread and the whole stay of water. The mighty man and the man of war, the judge and the prophet and the prudent and the ancient, the captain of 50 and the honorable man, the counselor and the cunning artificer, and the eloquent orator, which I'm proving tonight that I'm not. And I will give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them. And the people shall be oppressed, every one by another, and every one by his neighbor. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient, and the base against the honorable. When a man shall take hold of his brother in the house of the father, saying, Thou hast clothing, be thou our ruler, and let this ruin be under thy hand. In that day shall he swear, saying, I will not be a healer, for in my house is neither bread nor clothing. Make me not a ruler of the people. For Jerusalem is ruined, and Judah is fallen, because their tongue and their doings are against the Lord, to provoke the eyes of his glory. The show of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. Say ye to the righteous, that it shall be well with him, for they shall eat the fruit of their doings. Woe to the wicked, it shall be ill with him, for the reward of his hand shall be given him. As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err, and destroy the way of thy paths. The Lord standeth up to plead, and standeth to judge the people. The Lord will enter into judgment with the ancient of his people, and the princes thereof. For ye have eaten up the vineyard, the spoil of the poor is in your houses. What mean ye, that ye beat my people to pieces, and grind the faces of the poor, saith the Lord of hosts. Okay, again, dealing primarily with vengeance on the wealthy. Verse 1, For behold, the Lord of hosts, doth take away Jerusalem and Judah, the stay and the staff, the whole stay of bread and the whole stay of water. This is starting out with a summary statement that God is in control and He's going to deprive Judah and Jerusalem of every kind of support or everything that she depends on. So here's, you can take whatever aspect you want that Jerusalem or Judah has need of, their necessities, and God says, I am in control and I'm going to take it away from you. They're going to lose the basis of the necessities of life, thus. Food, that's the stay of bread, the whole stay of bread, whole stay of water, so both food and water, or food and drink. Someone turn over to Leviticus chapter 26 and verses 25 and read verse 25 and 26. Luke. I say, I'm proving I'm not a great orator, aren't I? Leviticus 26, verses 25 and 26.
And I will bring a sword upon you that shall avenge the quarrel of my covenant. And when ye are gathered together within your cities, I will send a pestilence among you, and ye shall be delivered into the hand of the enemy. And when I have broken the staff of your bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven, and they shall deliver you your bread again by weight, and ye shall eat and not be satisfied.
So there's the prophecy as to what God's going to do to them. Now then he says, I'm going to do that. Turn over to Deuteronomy 28. And let's read verses 49 through 57. Because again, you have basically the same thing being stated, that the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. And he shall eat the fruit of thy cattle and the fruit of thy land until thou be destroyed, which also shall not leave thee corn, either corn, wine, or oil, or the increase of thy kine, or flocks, or thy sheep, until he hath destroyed thee. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, until thy high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou trustest throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee in thy gates throughout all thy land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. And thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, and the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, which the Lord thy God hath given thee, in the siege and in the straitness wherewith thine enemy shall distress thee. So that the man that is tender among you and be very delicate, his eye shall be evil toward his brother, and toward the wife of his bosom, and toward the remnant of his children which he shall leave. So that he will not give to any of them of the flesh of his children whom he shall eat, because he hath nothing left him in the siege and in the straitness wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee in all thy gates. The tender and delicate woman among you, which would not adventure to set the sole of her foot upon the ground for delicateness and tenderness, her eye shall be evil toward the husband of her bosom, and toward her son, and toward her daughter, and toward her young one that cometh out from between her feet, and toward her children which she shall bear. For she shall eat them for want of all things secretly in the siege and straitness, wherewith thine enemy shall distress thee in thy gates.
Can I ask what those verses were again?
Deuteronomy 28:49 through 57. Not a very pleasant picture, is it? Going to the point of cannibalism because there's nothing to eat. Men and women both eating their children, because everything has been taken away from them. Well, to a great extent, that's what Isaiah is dealing with here in chapter 3. Everything, all of your delicacies are going to be taken. Now, that in Deuteronomy is going to see its ultimate fulfillment to a great extent in the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 by Titus and the Roman armies. But you see the same principle many times over throughout the Old Testament. And what Isaiah is dealing with here is another illustration of that situation. Under the siege led by Nebuchadnezzar against Jerusalem, during that time, men and women ate the flesh of their children, their parents, and yes, their mates. Someone read Jeremiah 19 and verse 9. Jeremiah is written at the time of, or during that siege of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. Now in Jeremiah 19 and verse 9.
And I will cause them to eat the flesh of their sons and the flesh of their daughters, and they shall eat every one the flesh of his friends in the siege of straitness, wherewith their enemies and they that seek their lives shall straighten them.
Okay. They're going to eat the flesh of basically anyone they can. Lamentations. Now, Lamentations was written by Jeremiah as a lament for Jerusalem. But Lamentation 2 and verse 20. Somebody read that. Okay. Eat her fruit, that's dealing with her children. Lamentation 2:20. Ezekiel was another one that was written during the time of the destruction of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. So turn over to Ezekiel 5 and verse 10. Someone read that for us. Ezekiel 5 and verse 10.
Therefore the fathers shall eat the son in the midst of thee, and the sons shall eat their fathers, and I will execute judgment from thee, and the whole remnant of thee will I scatter into all the land.
Okay. Eating each other, why? Because the Lord hath taken away all of the food and all of the water, all of the drink. And so in order to, can I use the word supplement or substitute for the food, they ate each other. Can you imagine yourself getting to the point where you would eat someone? Especially if you're dealing with your parents or your own children. Now, that's the situation that is being described for us. that they have, because of this siege that Nebuchadnezzar brings upon Jerusalem, that they are so much without water and without food that they go to that extreme of eating their own relatives. Dale.
See, they weren't circulating the Bible among themselves like they lost the book of law that guy, whatever his name is, found in the temple, and so the knowledge wasn't publicized. They weren't like circulating the knowledge, and so they had forgot about the wounds of God, and then it got fulfilled. I'm sure some of the remnant remembered it, but the public didn't think about it a lot. They were too busy with their idolatry, just being distracted and stuff.
Okay.
You talk about where this nation has got to, and why we don't think the Lord will. We haven't quite this far. I mean, this is something, when you say they were all people, it don't get much worse than that.
They had gotten to be desperate times. They are starving to death. And the only alternative is either you starve to death or you eat somebody, because there is no food. And that's what God is impressing upon them in Isaiah's day. This is what it's going to be like. God, I'm the one who's going to take away all of this, all of your food, all of your water. What are you going to do? Well, what we've read in Deuteronomy, what we read in Leviticus, that's what they're going to do, and that's what they ended up doing. Now, those are desperate times, aren't they? And from a personal standpoint, I cannot imagine getting to that point. But yet that is what happened. That's all there is to it. But it is important to notice God is the one doing this. Why did Babylon come and siege Jerusalem or besiege Jerusalem?
Well, they didn't observe their sabbatical years, and this, that, and the other, and they ignored God's law. Treated it lightly, among other things.
Okay, they ignored God's law, but why did they do it?
Why did who do it?
Why did Babylon do it? Because God brought them down upon Jerusalem to punish Jerusalem because of what you said. Yes, they had forgotten the law of God and had served idols, but God is the one who did this. And so, for behold, the Lord. And then the Lord of hosts. What does host mean? Okay, the Lord of armies. That could have a lot of connotations. Are there angels that would be the host of God? Doesn't he have angels that went out and did his bidding, even to the destroying of individuals? But doesn't it also include man's armies? Here it obviously has reference to what Babylon's going to do against Jerusalem. Why? Because he is the God of armies, God of hosts. And so he's going to do all of this. Verse 2 then, the mighty man, the man of war, the judge, and the prophet, and the prudent, and the ancient. Basically, the mighty man, he's dealing with soldiers, those men of war who would go out in battle. The judge, prophet, prudent, ancient, these are the leaders of the people. And the prudent and the ancient very possibly has reference to the forbidden soothsayers that they depended on. They would also be removed. Now this goes back to, again, verse 1, that the Lord's going to take these things away from Jerusalem. Well, he's going to take away the mighty man, the man of war, the judge, the prophet, the prudent, the ancient. God's taking them away. They're going to be removed. So basically all of the leaders are going to be gone. All of the men of war are going to be gone. Verse 3, the captain of 50, and the honorable man, and the counselor, and the cunning artificer, and the eloquent orator. So Isaiah just continuing this list that's going to be taken away from Israel. Military officers, the men who would be given honor, possibly those, he's dealing with those who are favored by kings or advisors, skilled in art, and skilled speakers. Skilled speakers or orators, or eloquent orator is translated enchanter by some others. Someone who's able to enchant someone or to place a spell on someone in a sense. So verse 4, and I will give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them. Well, their rulers, those individuals who would be experienced, competent, qualified men to rule over them. He's saying basically they're going to be replaced by people who are not qualified. The inexperienced youth. And I'll come back to my thought on this. There might be some literalness to this, as Manasseh began to reign when he was but 12 years old. But it's not dealing necessarily with age here, as it is ineptness. An individual might be 80, 50, 20, and still be inept. Then when the age does not make any difference as far as ability is concerned. As a crude illustration, Jason knows how to fly jet planes. Teaches kids how to do so. Get me in one of those, and even though I'm a little bit past 40 years old, well, gotta make myself sound good, I would be totally inept, wouldn't I? Would you trust your life with me flying it? No? I'm hurt. He'd be a fool too, wouldn't he? Because I don't have any qualities as far as flying is concerned, as never flown one. So age doesn't make any difference as far as qualifications are concerned. These are dealing with ineptness. But he uses to show that children, babes, ruling over them, being their princes, the inexperienced youth. It bothers me today, and I'm trying real hard to refrain from talking about the last shooting at schools. When things happen, or when you get to elections and the media goes to the youth as those who are supposedly so knowledgeable and have so much wisdom, and they're going to show who we should vote for because they have all this great wisdom. And I'm not so far removed from that time frame that I can't remember when being in college, I thought, man, I've got so much knowledge and wisdom. Can anyone of y'all think that way? Did you think that way? I doubt that I'm all that much of an exception along that line.
I'll tell you one, but it's taking too long.
But all of a sudden, all of these young people who have a far too high estimation of themselves are the ones who are being placed as being so knowledgeable and having so much wisdom and experience in these matters. When in reality, they have generally absolutely no knowledge, and they're so ignorant they don't even know that they're ignorant. Well, I said I was trying to, but I'm not going to. How many interviews and comments have been made by these high school students from the latest school shooting? And they're telling us what needs to be done in America to solve the problems, when they have absolutely no understanding of anything. If they had some decent parents, the parents should have yanked them out of the limelight and said, you shut up and sit down and learn some things before you try and open your mouth. But that's not our society today. We uphold them. God is saying that's going to be a shame. These are the only ones you have left. They're not the ones that we have left, but that's the ones we run to. Now then, I guess I'll say rant over with. But Isaiah is expressing the ineptness of the leaders. All of the wise, experienced leaders are gone. They've been taken away. And now then you only have inept ignoramuses to lead you. We'll stop there and, Lord willing, next week start with verse